Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the ME-262A1U1, of which is a currently Tier 5 7.3 BR strike aircraft that exists as a squadron vehicle for the German Air Force's tech trait. In this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this plane, including its stats, how it plays, its strengths and weaknesses. I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation, and if I feel that this ME-262 variant is worth either grinding for, or purchasing, or simply none of the above. As always, please subscribe if you like more content like this, as this would make you an awesome fan of Rammstein. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Now to start, as always, I'll place its stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its armament, turn time, and rate of climb. Now for how it plays. If you've played any type of ME-262, you already know how the A1U1 plays, at least in general. As such, the A1U1 is fairly large, heavy, slow to accelerate, and has an incredibly powerful armament that is comprised of three very different cannon types, these being the 30mm Mk103 cannons, the 30mm Mk108 cannons, and of course the 20mm MG151 cannons. Each of these come in a pair for a total of 6 cannons, and each cannon type functions very differently from the others. For example, the Mk103s have high velocity and good accuracy, but they also have a lower fire rate. The Mk108s have a very low velocity but have a decent fire rate and have absolutely devastating mine shells. And finally, the MG151s are the smallest of the bunch but have the highest fire rate, good accuracy, and the most ammunition between them, making them ideal for crits and for fighter kills. Between all three, you have an extremely powerful aircraft that can devastate enemies in a single burst, or if you so choose, you can fire them independently of each other. Interestingly, because the A1U1 has an air spawn, it can attack bombers much more easily than any other 262 variant outside of the C series, and also get the drop on enemy fighters and even some enemy strike aircraft. Even though it is listed as a strike aircraft, the A1U1 is anything but that in ARB, and should be played more like a heavy fighter with an air spawn. It lacks any type of secondary ordnance and has no ability to go after enemy bases, which basically makes this plane into a hunter-killer. Unfortunately, because of its slightly elevated BR compared to other similar ME-262s, it is in constant up tiers with much better performing aircraft, meaning that you need to use the strengths of this aircraft, such as its dive rate, powerful armament, and even its decent low-speed maneuverability to quickly defeat enemies. Otherwise, the enemy will almost always be able to outturn and outspeed you, leading to a quick death. Fight to your strengths and never expose your weaknesses in this aircraft, being that this has a very poor acceleration and mediocre maneuverability outside of, again, low speed. Now for CAS, the A1U1 is purely cannon based due to its lack of secondary ordnance. As such, you will need to approach almost every enemy from a high angle and try to fire your Mk103s or even possibly your MG151s directly into the top of the turret of the engine deck, though the Mk108s can also destroy lightly armored enemies or damage external modules such as tracks. Because of this, the A1U1 in a CAS role can be very tricky to use, as you will need to learn when to pull up from a dive before it's too late. Otherwise, the A1U1 can also provide very good air cover against enemy aircraft, which makes this plane fairly versatile, even though it does lack any traditional CAS weaponry. Now with that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses, and first for its strengths. This is a strike aircraft, so it benefits from an air spawn, which is extremely useful. Second, it has an extremely powerful armament located in the nose, meaning that shots do not need to converge and that head-ons are a somewhat plausible strategy with this vehicle. Third, speaking of, these cannons are extremely versatile, with each set of cannons performing their own roles, with the MG151s being great for crits, the Mk103s being better for anti-armor or for longer range anti-air shots, and finally the Mk108s being great for those one-hit anti-aircraft kills, especially against larger aircraft like bombers. Now for its fourth strength, it has fairly decent maneuverability, again at low speed, and finally, the A1U1 has a great rate of dive. Now for its weaknesses, its engines are large and extremely easy to hit, damage, and set on fire. Second, while these cannons are powerful, they have three very different shell velocities, meaning that having them all hit simultaneously will rarely happen. Third, it lacks any secondary ordnance, which could be a big no-no for CAS players. Fourth, it has mediocre acceleration and rate of climb. And finally, this plane is placed into up tiers nearly every match, which means that you will be facing much more advanced and much better performing post-war aircraft very often with this aircraft. Now with that said, let's get into how I score this vehicle. For dogfighting in the ARB, I give it a 6 out of 10. The A1U1 is a very heavily armed fighter that benefits from an air spawn, but will almost always be placed in up tiers that at least partially negate the air spawn advantage. With that said, it still has a good dive rate, good turn rate at low speed, and can knock out most enemy fighters with ease, so long as they do not start to dogfight you. This plane, when played correctly, can be a high scorer in every match, but you have to be careful not to let enemies take advantage of your weaknesses, as most jets are faster, can turn better in most conditions, have better acceleration, and also have fairly good armament. But unlike most other aircraft, the A1U1 delivers a knockout hit almost every single time that it hits an enemy fighter, regardless of the cannons that hit it. Now for CAS, I give it a 4.5 out of 10. This is an odd plane because while it functions very well as a cannon-based CAS plane, it is limited by the fact that only 2 of these 6 cannons on the A1U1 have any decent amount of armor pen, with those cannons again being the MK103s. Even still, they have a bit above 70mm of armor pen at max, with around 36mm of armor pen at 1 kilometer and 30 degrees, which is still plenty to pen the tops of enemy tanks. Add in the HE-loving MK108s and the lighter 20mm MG151s, you actually have a fairly decent CAS plane that can destroy a variety of enemy tanks and lightly armored vehicles, although of course only one at a time, being that the A1U1 lacks any bombs, rockets, and any other type of secondary ordnance. Regardless, in the right hands, this plane can earn many kills in CAS, and is also a good plane to provide air cover to stop enemy aircraft from killing your team. The main downside is that the A1U1 forces you into playing cannon-based CAS. If that type of gameplay is not for you, then this plane might not be an ideal CAS pick for you. Now that said, overall, I give it a 5.5 out of 10. Being an ME-262, the A1U1 forces you to play in very certain ways or face destruction. While they are extremely effective when you shoot first or force an enemy to play to your strengths, they also die very quickly when fighting against the menagerie of post-war fighters that they might encounter, as such planes generally have noticeable performance advantages over the A1U1. Still, the A1U1 has a devastating armament that is unmatched by almost every plane in Warthunder, and thus has the ability to win quickly, as it needs to, as extended engagements do not work out well for this plane. For CAS, again, it's a one-trick pony, although is very good when used correctly. Still, I would probably take the DO335B2 over this plane even at this BR, as it has more ammo for its MK103s and can carry up to 3 bombs, while still being a fairly capable aircraft in general that can also provide very good air cover. Now that being said, should you buy or research this plane? Well, I'd say yes to researching it, but I would avoid spending GE on it. In short, I really like the A1U1 as it offers a somewhat unique take on the ME-262 formula currently in Warthunder, while still being fairly similar enough that it doesn't feel unusual when flying it. The A1U1 has an extremely beneficial air spawn, but is also heavier and slower than most other planes that it will fight. I feel that this is extremely capable, but it isn't a necessary plane, especially if you want it for CAS or for grinding the German air tech tree. For both of those things, I would just simply advise to take the DO335B2 any day of the week over the ME-262 A1U1. Now this is not a strike against the A1U1, but rather heaping praise on the DO335B2. And again, it's not that the A1U1 is bad, but it's just that the B2 is more versatile, especially for CAS, and is of course a premium aircraft, meaning that you receive premium bonuses and can grind through rank 5 of the German air tech tree without having any RP penalties. Speaking of, if you didn't know, the ME-262 A1U1, being that it is a Squadron vehicle, can only research from rank 4 through rank 6 without any research penalty. So if you're trying to research any other rank in the German air tech tree, the A1U1 will receive a huge penalty, whereas again through rank 5, the DO335B2 will not. But with that said, to get back to this review, I personally really like the A1U1 and really like its playstyle, but I just don't see it being as good or so meta defining that it's a must-have. So again, I recommend researching this, but I would kind of stay away from buying it unless for whatever reason you have a real need for this plane. Now that said, thank you all so much for watching. Please of course consider liking, commenting, subscribing. I want to know what you guys think about this video and the A1U1 in the comments below. I am always interested to read your comments and your thoughts on these vehicles. But either way, thanks again, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.